Okay, so you've got some sales, but how do you go from just one sale a day to hundreds of sales a day? Today, we're going to be talking about how you can scale your Etsy store so that eventually it can be your full time income. My name is Christina. I am a full time print on demand seller that, like you, had a point in my journey where I was just starting out and perhaps just getting a few sales, maybe just a few sales a week, maybe even just like one or two a month. And I really wanted to know how I could scale my store upwards. So I wanted to share today some tips that I use to get my store from just starting to making at least 15 sales a day on a slow day. My first tip is to start building a more cohesive brand. Now that you've started making some sales, you're probably starting to get a little bit of a hint to see which keywords are working for you, which niches you are being found in, and what types of designs are selling for you. Now that you have a better idea of what niches are working for you, perhaps start making your store centered more around what is working. So now you can probably revisit your logo, you can revisit your banner, especially your shop title, and maybe even your sections to be using more keywords for the ones that are already working for you. And you should also be doing this just to start building up some trust with some people. So you should really work on creating your brand through your banner and your logo, and maybe even carrying that through to your listing photos. Having a cohesive looking store really gives to trust. And now that you've got some idea as to where you are going with your store, it might be a lot easier in creating that brand for yourself. Number two still ties in with your storefront, but I would go back and look at all your first listings. Now that you started making sales, you're probably starting to see which keywords are working. And honestly, you've probably really improved since your first listings, even if it's only been a month or two. Try going back to this first listings you created and revisiting your SEO if they have not sold yet. I wouldn't bother editing things if they've already started selling, because editing things is going to shake up the SEO. I wouldn't touch that. But for the ones that just haven't moved anywhere, and now you go back and take a look at, and you're like, wow, I can tell that those were one of my first designs. And don't be ashamed of that. I had to go back, and taking a look at my first designs was embarrassing, and trying to understand what I was thinking with my Etsy SEO. Now you've had more practice. Go back and revisit all of your old listings to bring them up to standard with your brand new store. With your selling products, you probably already also noticed certain colors might be selling better for you. Why don't you try switching your old listings to use a new mock-up photo of what you've realized is already working? I have a few mock-ups that just seem to do amazing. So I've gone back and duplicated old listings and tried reselling them under a brand new listing, testing a new mock-up photo using that one that was working for other designs. Sometimes it's just that the mock-up photo that you were using on your last design wasn't appealing enough. Number three is considering now using social media. I'm personally not myself big on spending time on trying to grow on social media. The only thing that I sometimes upload to is Pinterest, just so I can learn Pinterest myself. But I honestly wouldn't focus on building my social media presence first before knowing your brand and knowing what's selling in your niche. But now that you have products that obviously are garnering some attention, I think this is now the time to try to reach a wider audience through using social media and advertising only what's been selling already. Don't waste time trying to push out listings that have never sold on Etsy, because chances are they probably just aren't wanted by that niche, unfortunately. But for the ones of yours that are selling already, getting in front of a larger audience then means that perhaps those people will also like your product. If you've done what I mentioned earlier and really built up your brand around a certain niche that was working, another way to market your product could be reaching out to influencers within that niche. This one is a little bit difficult because you kind of need a very specialized store. So you need to make sure you are optimizing your store first, and then finding a influencer that aligns with those values, and perhaps reaching out and working on a brand deal with them to see if they would market your product for you. But you need to make sure that what you are offering in your store really matches up with that influencer's following. Then I would consider expanding your product line. When I first started, I was only selling t-shirts, but then I noticed that if a product or a design was selling on a t-shirt, it would also sell on a sweatshirt. So then I started selling sweatshirts and t-shirts, and actually my sweatshirt sales majorly surpassed my t-shirts. And then I started putting my designs that were doing really well on sweatshirts on hoodies, and then I put them on tote bags using different SEO each time to target whoever was searching for that individual product. So making sure I had one listing that was hoodie focused, one individual listing that was tote bag focused. And it turns out when a design was selling on one product, a lot of the time it would sell really well on another product because I know the design was well, it was resonating with people, but perhaps people just didn't want a t-shirt. They wanted it on a different product. And this is a super easy way to start getting more listings because you don't need to redesign every single listing. A great way to start scaling upwards as well is to make sure that you are providing excellent customer service. If you are getting negative reviews early on, chances are your store is going to have a very, very hard time of scaling up. So I try to make customer service the heart of my Etsy store, responding to people quickly, trying to message people if there's negative reviews. And one secret tip is I am always reaching out to people and asking them to leave a review. I say something like, hey, I noticed your product was delivered. I hope you love it. And if you do, if you could leave a review, that would greatly help my store. And that has gotten me a 32% review rate, which is way higher than most Etsy stores. If you do not ask people for reviews, you probably get a 10% review rate, and you'll hear more back from the negative reviewers, which you do not want. So reach out to people, ask for reviews, and get that trust, build it in your store by getting more orders and more reviews. Another trick I use to really grow my store is running sales and running sales often for a short period of time. I'll run a 10 to 15% sale almost every single day, running for about 2 or 3 days so that you are creating urgency. When you run a sale, people are going to see this little banner at the side of your listing that says 24 hours left in this sale, which will encourage some quick impulse decisions so that people don't miss out on the sale. Running it for a month doesn't always work. It still works better than not running a sale, but by doing a short little burst of a sale and doing this often, you are creating that sense of urgency, which is going to result in a lot more sales. Usually on the last day of my sale is when I get the most sales because you're going to get, there's 2 hours left, there's 1 hour left, leaving people with little time to decide and jumping on purchasing your product. The next tip is to utilize the data that you have collected so far. Now that you've been making sales, you're going to have some data on your Etsy store that can help you with some decisions. You do already need to be making some sales for this page to show up because Etsy needs to collect data before they show this to you. But let me show you where you can get this data. So once you have data, you're going to get access to this search analytics. Just go into your Etsy shop manager. You're going to go to marketing, and we're going to go to search analytics. Keep in mind that this is not my print on demand shop. This is my digital mock-up store, which you can check out, but I do keep my print on demand store secretive to protect my niches. But if you open this page and you have enough data, you're going to get some stats that look like this. You're going to see what people are typing in the search bar to find you. You're going to find out how many impressions you're getting from that. What position are you showing up in? Are you ranking high? How many visits you get from that? And even your conversion rate for that keyword. So you can see what's working for you and what keywords you need to keep using. So using this, you can really try to understand what keywords you want to be using more in your listings and what products you should continue making. Another test I recommend running for your store, this one might not work for everybody, but is trying to use Etsy ads but only on products that are already selling. A lot of the time, you're gonna be losing money if you're running ads on things that don't have any sales behind them. But if you already have a bestseller, running an ad can sometimes help it. This really depends on what you sell and your margins to see if it's actually profitable. Personally, for my store, it actually isn't very profitable, but I know others who kill it with running ads on their bestsellers. For me, I only ever do it to test during Christmas, and only a few of my bestsellers are even profitable when I do this. So this one's not a guarantee, but I recommend testing it perhaps for at least a week for your bestsellers in your store. And then my last tip, which is more print on demand related and not Etsy related, but is to start expanding to other platforms. I don't find it worth it to upload every single one of your designs to Teespring, Amazon, Redbubble. But if you have a bestseller on Etsy, a lot of the times it'll sell on these other platforms as well. Because, like we talked about earlier, in terms of social media, you already have proof that this one's going to work. So I actually also have a Redbubble account, and it turns out all my bestsellers on Redbubble are also my bestsellers on Etsy, even though I honestly don't get too much from Redbubble. So I wouldn't, again, spend all of my time uploading there. I would only recommend uploading your bestsellers there because then it is probably worth the time. And if you can get into Amazon merch, uploading it there. If you can get into Teespring, uploading it there. But trying to bring over your whole store to multiple platforms is going to be way too overwhelming. Etsy is my main selling platform. It outdoes all of the other platforms. So keep all your testing and sales in there and just expand with your bestsellers. So overall, the beginning of your store should be about testing, testing, testing. Scaling should be following about what's working and then really pushing what's already working instead of trying to get things that have never worked off the ground because perhaps they are just never going to sell. Perhaps they don't resonate. I'm sorry, maybe they just don't like your design. But for the ones that are working, that's where you are going to follow every single signal that bestseller has given you in terms of keywords, in terms of which products to sell, which niches to stick in, etc. If you learned anything valuable, if you could please drop a like and subscribe as I'm really trying to grow my YouTube to help bring more content like this to you guys. All right, thanks guys, and I'll talk to you next week.